This video is about the Minoans again. I know you watched a lot of videos already, but this is going to culminate, end it, and just kind of go through everything that we've already learned last week. The Minoans were a civilization. As you saw in the other videos, the time period that the Minoans were around really varies, but we've accepted that it's roughly around 2800 BC. As you can see, if you learn about Greece, the first ones we need to learn about are the Minoans. They were on the island of Crete. They were also known as Cretans because they came from the island of Crete. They grew wheat, barley, grapes, and olives. And when the olive grows, that's an olive tree right there. When the olive grows and vineyards produce more than was needed, the Minoans traded the surplus for goods that they could not grow or make on Crete. Since there are many forests on Crete, the Minoans learned to work with wood and became good carpenters. They also learned to work with metal. Now, this is different than the Egyptians, who didn't have as many trees on their land. The Minoans used metalworking and carpentry skills to build ships and began to earn a living from trade instead of farming. Once they could hit the water, they were surrounded by water, so it made sense that they do that. When pirates, however, pirates would be considered people on the seas who would come up to them and take all their stuff. And that started as soon as people were able to get onto the water in different civilizations, there would be others coming along who would want to take what you have. Kind of what happens today, not like the pirates that we're used to from seeing that have been glorified, but the real pirates are the people who are thieves on the water, and they would also sometimes, quite often, sink ships. Once they threatened the Minoans, they changed the way they built their ships, so it made the ships go faster. They made them slimmer with 2 or 3 masts. Masts are the things above here that grabs the wind. Instead of just one, the Minoans also put a deck over their heads of rowers to protect them, and placed a large wooden beam at the prow or the front of the ship. This was used to smash a hole in the enemy ship. It was quite effective. Here's another example of Minoan ship. Here's one of the beams that they put to just smash a hole into another ship. Here are the many rowers. When there wasn't enough wind or when you had to go somewhere fast, you had the rowers. This one doesn't show over their head. There are other pictures that show over their head. By about 2000 BC, Crete, because they did such a good job with this, it was the world's first important seafaring civilization. And what that means is they were able to really navigate and go along the seas without a problem. Minoan merchant ships traveled far to trade pottery, leather, and bronze, and metal jewelry, as well as bronze armor. The Minoans, on the other hand, were a small people with bronze skin and long dark hair. Men, even though you can't see it in this picture, wore stripped loincloths, long robes embroidered with flowers, or pants that bagged at the knees. Women tended to wear full skirts, short-sleeved jackets that laced in front. And the Minoans had small waists and wore tight belts to seem to have been to show them off, but we're not really sure. We just know that in all the pictures that we have seen, this is kind of what we see. They all tend to wear jewelry such as gold and silver earrings, necklaces, bracelets, and rings. The Minoans spent their time in a variety of ways. Men farmed and fished. They raised cattle. As you saw in the video, they had long-haired sheep and goats. You saw the goats in the video. They also served in the Navy and the Royal Guard. Notice no army because they didn't really need to have an army. They were surrounded by water, so they needed a navy. Women performed household duties, attended sporting events, and went hunting in chariots. So that's a little different than what you're familiar with Egyptians. The people of Crete loved sports. They built what was probably the world's first arena, and this is one in Phaistos. They also had them in Crete. If you notice, what makes them interesting and fascinating is it stood in the open air. They had the stone steps that seemed to form grandstands, and about 500 people could sit and watch the action. The king and the royal party usually had their own special box seats. This is one of those achievements from Greece in general, because not only did they do it in Crete, but also in the mainland of Greece, where you had this seating, this step seating arena and outdoors, and we still use it today in our arena, in our indoor arenas, in our indoor areas of seating. You'll notice that our seats, if you go to the Dunkin' Donut Center, they're seated on a slant and almost like the step seating that allows you to be able to see things really well. So that's one of their achievements in Greece in general. Boxing matches were held in the arenas, and you've seen already pictures of this. It's bull leaping. This is a form of bullfighting. It was also held there, and the idea of this was that a young man and woman fought the bull together, and that was something that was different too, because men and women seemed to participate in this particular sport. The man would grab the bull's horns. As the bull raised its head to toss him, the man would do a somersault, landing on his feet on the bull's back. He would then do a backflip, and there's a picture of him doing the backflip. Standing behind the bull, the woman would catch her partner as he landed, probably as a spotter. Many experts believe bull leaping was a religious ceremony as well as a sport. The Minoans built many cities which were different from those of other ancient civilizations in two ways. At the heart of each Minoan city stood a palace rather than a temple. Here is a video of the very famous palace, Knossos. If you'll notice that the palace itself didn't have walls around it. Instead, people depended on the sea and the native for protection. One of the largest cities was right here, Knossos. It covered about 28 acres, and about 1/5 of the area is taken up by the 5-story palace. This is a video that we're going to watch briefly that shows reconstruction of the palace. It's a long video, but we're going to skip through it. Okay, I took the liberty of turning off the volume so we can continue watching it. As you watch it, I'm going to continue telling you a little bit about the temple. It was a 5-story palace that served as a government building, a temple, a factory, and a warehouse. And there you can see some of the potential royal residence they had. It was pretty huge. Its walls were built of stone and sun-dried brick. If you see closely, some of the sun-dried brick is right there in this reconstruction, this digital reconstruction. And that was all framed with wooden beams so that it would all stand tall. The Minoans decorated the inside walls with brightly colored frescoes or watercolors paintings made on damp plaster. That's what a frescoes is. Here is a picture of the merchant area, the artisans area. As you can see, they probably made vases, various vases. The palace had a bathroom with bathtubs and flush toilets. Now that's pretty fascinating. I want to scoot ahead to where that is. The Queen's bath is a very famous room. They had, which is unheard of, hot and cold running water and portable fireboxes in the heating rooms. The fact that they had toilets and that they had some of the floors were heated was pretty amazing, and no other civilization that we are aware of had flush toilets. In fact, many civilizations afterwards did not have flush toilets either. The idea about flush toilets, which is fascinating, is that the water would flush down and go into a river that they had, and you wouldn't have the smell. If you've ever gone into the bathroom and known a person who before you forgot to flush the toilet, it smells really bad. And that's something that the people of Kenosis didn't have to worry about, the people of Crete, because, and they even had some toilets in their regular houses as well. So they didn't have to worry about the smell because they had to flush toilets and the sink didn't stay there. So that was pretty amazing. The palace had several entrances and passageways. They formed this kind of labyrinth. Here's an aerial view of it, or a network of paths. Here's another view with the top off of it. Kind of looks like a labyrinth right there. Because labyrinth means double axe, the palace was called the House of the Double Axe. The palace was also called by the name because it was filled with pictures, carvings, and bronze medals of a double axe. That's why historians call it that. And there's that picture of a double axe. Sea captains, merchants, and shipbuilders lived in houses around the palace, so this would be considered the palace here. And around in the outside part here would be where the sea captains, merchants, and shipbuilders lived. Past their houses stood those of artisans who made beautiful cups and vases and designed delicate jewelry. Those houses, or many of the houses, were built side by side around courtyards. Most were 2 stories high, like this one here. Lower walls were made of stone, upper walls of sun-dried brick. On the inside walls were painted scenes of daily life. Each house also had its own well and drains. Again, not needing to worry about the need for the stench, they were able to get rid of their waste. Many of the Minoan houses had no entrance from the street. A person went in or out through the roof and lowered a ladder over the side of the house. Later, wooden doors and windows made out of oiled and tinted parchment or thin animal skin were added. The rulers of Crete were priest kings. They made the laws and represented the gods on earth. The priest kings would come into the top of the Mount Juctus here, as seen here, to look for a sign from heaven that would tell them the will of the god. Then they would tell the people what the gods wanted them to do. The Minoans had many gods. The main god of Crete was the goddess Mother Earth. She made plants grow and brought children into the world. To honor her, the Minoans built shrines or sacred places of worship. They made these shrines in palaces, they made them on housetops, and in caves. The people believed that hilltops led to heaven, and caves led to the underworld. So you can see why the mountain would be considered the place where they would go, because the mountain is the highest point. That's a very common theme in many civilizations. Sacred horns made of clay and covered with stucco rested against the back wall of each shrine. Here's an example of a shrine that was more than likely at Kenosis. A hole between the horns held usually a double axe. Around the horns were clay models of animals, and people left offerings of human hair, don't ask me why, fruit, flowers, jewels, and gold at the shrines. Minoans believed that certain things were sacred. So, there's an example of the bull with a double axe. That was a very popular picture and an item that was found. The lily was their sacred flower. The king wore a plumed crown, which means this is a plume sticking out of it right here, of lilies and a lily necklace. This was an actual picture, so that's where the idea comes from of what they have. The double axe was sacred, as it stood for the power of Mother Earth and the authority of the king. And then the dove, as you see in the bottom here, was sacred because it flew to the heavens. And there's a double axe. Sadly, all civilizations seem to come to an end, and we're not really sure what happened to the Minoans. Because we could not figure out their writing, as you saw in one of the videos, not seeing writing means we don't get a full story. We've only been able to tell the life of the Minoans from artifacts that were found. So since no one is certain, we do know that about 1400 BC, control of the sea and the land of Crete passed to a people called the Myceneans. So when people don't know something, sometimes they make up a story. And the people of Greece made up this story about the fall of the Minoans. Legend explains the fall of the Minoans with the story of Theseus and the Minotaur. A young Greek prince named Theseus was brought to Knossos. He was to be sacrificed to the Minotaur, who was a huge monster the king kept in the palace labyrinth. The Minotaur had the body of a man and the head of a bull, and lived on human flesh, which means he ate people. Theseus was put into the labyrinth. He fought the monster with a magical sword and killed it. When the Minotaur died, the power of the Minoans died too. Again, we're not really sure about this. There have been a lot of other different speculations. People have thought about not far there was an island called Santorini, and there was this huge explosion on the island, and people feel that explosion may have caused a tsunami to come and pretty much drowned many of the Minoans. That's a fascinating theory that I've explored, and there are all kinds of videos on YouTube about the Minoans. There are lots more to see about the Minoans, but we just can't spend all of our time on the Minoans. So after watching this video, we're going to move into the Myceneans and probably finish with the Myceneans for this school year. So hopefully you'll continue learning about ancient Greece and go beyond the Myceneans and continue to look at what came after the Myceneans, including Athens and Sparta. But the Myceneans will lead us into and onto the mainland of Greece because that's where they came from. So the rest of your videos will be about that. Thanks again. Have a good day.